Lost in the drama of an unprecedented presidential race, buried beneath the races for U.S. Congress are contests where a lot of people couldn't identify who the candidates are. It's the elections for 134 state of Minnesota House seats, the lower body of the Minnesota legislature. The democratically controlled Senate and governor are not up for re-election until 2026. What's at stake? Well, just about everything. Remember the 2023 legislative session?
Now, this is Talking Points on CBS News Minnesota.
Good evening and welcome to Talking Points. I'm Esme Murphy. The 2023 legislative session is where the DFL trifecta passed a wave of legislation. Everything from paid family and sick leave, legalizing marijuana, codifying abortion rights, driver's licenses for the undocumented, free college tuition for those with low incomes, restored voting rights for felons, free school meals for all, gun control, including a red flag law and background checks for private gun sales, and more. For Democrats, it was a progressive wish list delivered. For Governor Tim Walz, it was a springboard to a vice presidential pick. For Republicans, it was a conservative's big government nightmare come true, and it was made possible only by the DFL trifecta. The DFL currently has a 4-seat majority in the Minnesota House, a slim margin that Republicans are working feverishly to upend. Tonight in Talking Points, we will explore how a handful of districts statewide, each with 87,000 residents, are being targeted in elections that could be decided by a few hundred votes or less. You'll hear from both Republican and DFL leaders, as well as political analysts on both sides. Let's start with the challengers. Republican Minority Leader, Representative Lisa Demuth. A successful Republican campaign to flip the Minnesota House would make her the House Speaker. Joining us right now is Lisa Demuth. She is the Minority Leader of the Minnesota House of Representatives. Thank you so much for coming on.
Good to see you, Esme. Thank you.
Okay, we're talking about the fight for the Minnesota House, and I think for a lot of people are kind of going, what? What are you talking about? I mean, I just don't think this is on people's radar, but it's certainly on your radar, I know. How hard are you fighting to win control of the Minnesota House?
Well, I think that is a great topic to be talking about, and we know that it is top of mind for us, specifically in the House. We're just 4 seats short of that majority in the Minnesota House of Representatives. And I think you're right. People don't always have this on their radar. They, school hasn't quite started and, it's not cold yet. And we think of elections more when it's cold in that November time. But we are definitely working hard. And what we've done since January of 23, when we were not in the majority and we've served under a full Democrat controlled in the state, what we've done is we've really focused on getting great candidates that are well known in their districts, who can work hard on their campaign and be even better legislators. That hasn't changed for us, Esme. That's the goal that we still have, and we are working hard at that.
One of the things the Democrats point to, the reason why the Minnesota House is so important and the legislature is so important, is they talk about the trifecta that's still in existence, and they talk about 2023 and how wonderful 2023 was with all that legislation that was passed. I know you folks in fighting for the House also point to 2023, saying this was not good for Minnesota. Can you explain your viewpoint on that?
Yeah, when we look back at 2023, we came into that legislative session with an $18 billion surplus, and we fully expected that would be returned back to the taxpayers in a meaningful way. That did not happen. We heard $2,000 checks were going to go out to all taxpayers. Some taxpayers ended up getting $260 checks. That was it. The other thing was, not only did we spend through that $18 billion surplus under full Democrat control, taxes and fees in the state of Minnesota increased almost $10 billion, almost a 40% increase in the state budget. What that means is in the next 2 to 3 years, we are looking at a deficit. So when you think of the economic issues facing the state, there is no way to continue on that type of spending path. Minnesota has high taxes. We do not have a revenue issue. We have a spending issue. And that also includes the amount of money that has gone unchecked out in fraud where no one has been held accountable. Those are the things that are really motivating us to bring balance back to the legislature, accountability, and we can do that by taking full control of the Minnesota House of Representatives and bringing that balance.
And you mentioned that you're only down 4 seats. I'm always so interested, and I think people are interested in how you target these seats. One example is there are a number of veterans retiring on both sides of the aisle, but Gene Pawlowski is one representative, state representative, who is retiring, and he is a long-time representative, but has represented a district that's in a Republican area. Is Gene Pawlowski's district one that you're targeting?
Yeah, we know that we had about 4 seats that we lost with 1,500 votes or less. And so when we look at the numbers from last time, we definitely are targeting different districts based on those numbers. Representative Pawlowski's district down in Winona, we were already targeting before he announced his retirement. We have a great candidate down there, Aaron Rapinski, who's a citywide councilman, owns a riverboat business, and is well known in his community. With that being said, we already had been working with him, and he had announced his candidacy well before Representative Pawlowski announced his retirement. Aaron Rapinski went ahead and he won that primary that he did have just a short time ago, over 90% of the vote. And so we are very, very excited about that seat. The other one that we're very excited about is up on the Iron Range, the Dave Lislegard seat. We have a great candidate in there. Cal Warwas, again, had a primary, came through that with flying colors. We're very excited about that. That seat specifically, we know Governor Walz lost last year, or 2 years ago in his run for governor. He lost that area. Again, the Lislegard seat, now our candidate is Cal Warwas, and we've been working with him since last summer.
One of the things that's so difficult, though, is you mentioned that these districts can win by just a few hundred votes. Literally every vote counts. How do you go in there? Are you just getting people to door knock 24/7? I mean, how do you actually physically do it to try and get your vote out in these districts?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And an important thing to bring to people's mind is we are door knocking, and that one-to-one contact with voters is really important. We also know that early voting starts September 20th. And so we are encouraging people to get to the polls, to get that absentee vote in, get that early vote in, really banking their votes. The other thing is, though, that's why we wanted to pick candidates that were going to be well known in their districts. And up in the Iron Range area, Cal Warwas, he's a 27-year steel worker. He's union, he's well known in the area, he knows his district. Getting candidates that are known and are already have some type of name recognition helps, but then
Right.
letting people know how much they do want to work for their area.
You mentioned early voting, which starts September 20th. It is right around the corner. And I do want to ask you about this because Republicans from President Trump, former President Trump on down, have disparaged early voting for years. And it comes down to Democrats have had a big advantage in this area. And quite frankly, this is Minnesota. We hope it's not a blizzard, but it could be a blizzard on election day. In for which case, many of the places, outstate Minnesota in the areas that we're talking about, it's really hard to get places. It's really hard to get to the polls on election day if that's the case. It sounds like you feel early voting is very important.
We do, and that we know that is legal. We know that's available. We know people's schedules can change, the weather could change, whatever comes up. Early voting is the most important thing people can do if they choose to do that. We are encouraging people to do that as soon as possible. Just get out there, get their vote, and then help their neighbors. If someone doesn't know how to do that, they can help them get to the service center or wherever it needs to take place. It's something that we are definitely encouraging. Of course, same day voting, a lot of people like to do that. Either way, people need to get to the polls and cast their vote.
All right. Well, Lisa Demuth, thank you so, Minority Leader Lisa Demuth, and I guess you would soon like to be, I guess, not just Majority Leader, but Speaker Demuth. That would be
That
a
is
change
true.
for you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for the conversation.
Up next, Republican analyst Amy Koch and Democratic analyst Abou Amara. Well, joining us right now is Republican analyst Amy Koch. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thanks for having me.
All right. How much do Republican analysts and Republican bigwigs worry about the Minnesota House elections?
Well, I think they're pretty optimistic about the Minnesota House elections, as are the DFL. And I would say to both of them, hold your horses, because it is right now, I really think, too close to call. It could come down to a 68-66 split. And to be honest, I can do the district math that it works either way. It could be a DFL win that close with a vote or two, and it could be a Republican win that close with a vote or two.
Yeah, and I've done a few interviews on this. With a 4-vote majority, Jamie Long said, "Hey, it's a 2-vote. It's 2 votes. Basically, we lose 2 houses. That's it." And the Republicans. I've heard some Republicans say, "Well, look at Gene Pawlowski's district in Winona. The guy has been there for nearly 40 years. He's a Democrat, and all around him is a sea of Republicans." I mean, things like that. It makes it look like the Republicans really have a shot.
Well, there's only 4 seats, and there's some obvious holds. The Winona seat, as you mentioned, Gene Pawlowski. I mean, it's not a gimme for Republicans, but it's greater Minnesota in an area with a Democrat. Frankly, Dave Liz Lagarde up on the range. The entire range has gone Republican except for this 1 seat, and it was very close. There's a great Republican candidate there, Cal Warwas. I think that's going to go Republican. I mean, I think that's likely. So, but then there are seats in the suburbs that Republicans have to hold that are a little touchier, particularly given, the presidential race at the top of the ticket. So, there was a few weeks ago that it was looking like Trump was running away with everything, including Minnesota. And I said, Trump's going to win Minnesota. That has definitely changed with the with Kamala Harris coming into the race, and the shift in the momentum. But look, we're 2 months out. That can change again as fast as it changed. So I'm not trying to be political here. It is just that close. It is within a vote or two either way.
And if Republicans do flip the House, I mean, really, what's the end game? Is it just to be able to block more legislation, a wave of legislation like we saw in 2023?
Well, I think there's some obviously defense there, but there's also some offense. There's some things that Republicans would like to see, right? If there's, and again, depends if there's a surplus or if there's a deficit, but there weren't any substantial tax cuts of any kind with a $17 billion surplus in 2023. I think Republicans would say, look, if there's some extra money, that should go back to the taxpayers. You spent $18 billion in surplus. Now let's get some tax relief. So I think there's some offense and some defense. Of course, it's the Senate. There's 1 race that's up, maybe 2, depending on what happens with the Woodbury cat burglar situation. But that is only a 1 seat as well. So, that you got to keep an eye on the Senate. I think it's likely to stay Democrat, but there's no guarantee there. And then, like I said, the other thing, the wrinkle with the thing with the Senate is there's likely to be a special, if Governor Walz and Kamala Harris win, then Bobby Joe Champion, Senator Champion, becomes the lieutenant governor. That leaves them back at a 33-33 split in January after the session has started. And with, that seat, Senator Champion's seat is going to be DFL. I promise you, I guarantee it. But there's 6 to 7 weeks during session that there would have to be a special election. So, there's so many complications. And I was saying, the one thing you don't have to worry about is Governor Walz has got 2 years. So that's a constant. Now nothing's constant in this election. And I've been wrong too many times. So,
well, and your point about the fact that there's that much time left, look how quickly things have changed in just weeks, by the week, it seems. So
there's 2.5 months left in this race in particular. In politics, that's a lifetime. In this race, it's changing every week. So.
All right. Well, Amy Koch, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Well, joining us right now, Abou Amara, Democratic analyst. Thank you so much, Abou, for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Esme.
All right, lost in all this, and early voting starts in just a few weeks here, September 20th, is the battle for the Minnesota House. Every single one of the Minnesota House members, as you know, is up for re-election. Why is this such a big deal?
Well, as a guy who used to work in the Minnesota House and help get Democrats elected, I'm telling you, this is where the rubber hits the road. Obviously, a lot of folks are paying attention to what's happening at the national level with the president, vice president, the Senate. But really, the things that are going to impact most Minnesotans are really going to happen based on what happens in these 134 races in the Minnesota House.
All right. And I think if anybody wonders about the importance of the legislature, just go back to 2023 and all that was passed there. If Republicans, right now, the Democrats, DFL has a small minority in the House. Republicans are saying they're going to seize hold. People are fed up with Governor Tim Walz and the DFL trifecta. If they do that, if the Republicans succeed in winning control, that will make a divided government. I mean, what does that mean? Just kind of stalemate for the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think Minnesotans remember there was about nearly a decade where there was a bit of stalemate and not a lot got done. And then over the last 2 years, Democrats had a trifecta, as you said, and a lot of things happened, right? Paid family leave, the legalization of marijuana, education funding. And I think Minnesotans prefer progress over stagnation. And so I suspect you'll see Democrats talking about that in the campaign trail.
But do you think people really get that when it comes to these House races? I mean, I think if I went out on the Nicollet Mall and asked people who their House representative was, yeah. I think 9 out of 10 people, and I'm not dissing our wonderful viewers, would not know, because there's a lot going on in this world and in their lives.
Yeah, there's no question name ID is not as high at some of the local races, your state representative races. And so I often tell Democrats, grab your surfboard because you're probably going to ride the wave. What is happening nationally is going to impact a lot of these races. With that said, you're going to see a lot of individuals step up who are really known in their communities. And I think that's the difference. Most folks have never met Kamala Harris. Most folks have never met, these national figures, but most folks have met these people running for local office. And some of these high caliber candidates, you really want them to be tied in with their communities so that when they go to vote, people will be like, you know what, I recognize that name, I know that guy, and hopefully that can cut through and make the difference.
Maybe it's just that I've been around for a while, but I feel like an awful lot of representatives that I've known and covered are retiring. So there's a changeover there. Does that present an opportunity for which party? Because that's a big difference. People are used to these people.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think it depends on where you look in the state. One example is in Winona with Gene Pawlowski, who's been a state representative for a long period of time as a Democrat. He outperforms any Democrat in southeastern Minnesota. He's stepping down. And so that's going to be a challenge for the Democrats. Running a new candidate who, although is good, is not nearly as known within the community as Gene Pawlowski. So there are pockets like that for both Democrats and Republicans. And it's going to be key, whoever that person is, to step up to really ingrain themselves in the next 80 plus days with their voters so that they can get elected in November.
That's a perfect example, because that part of the state is Trump country. And yet Gene Pawlowski has continued to win as sort of a holdover of when that area wasn't so Republican at all. And because people voted because he was good. He did the job for his constituents. Now a new person comes in. I mean, you have to think that Republicans are just drooling over that seat.
Yeah, that's one of the seats that they think that they're going to have hopes with. I suspect, though, Gene Pawlowski is going to be almost campaigning for his successor. And so hopefully there's some osmosis vibes people get from Gene Pawlowski, and hopefully people who are stepping down are going to be doing that for others as well. So, it is a challenge, but I think Democrats can survive.
How do you physically plan a strategy for one of these districts? Because they're so small. I mean, you can, I guess the door knocking is big, the signs, all the old fashioned stuff is big, but that's got to be hard because these districts come down to a few hundred votes.
Yeah, these, as someone who's done it before, you really micro target. I mean, you establish your win number pretty early. Okay, in this district, you're going to need 19,000 votes. And you really put together a plan of identifying 19,000 individuals, knocking on those doors, making sure you're making the contacts, and then making sure people vote and confirming they voted. And then you're building your model around that. It's less theoretical and very practical.
Is that going in and finding, because of the presidential primary, which people voted in which primary, and then literally targeting them, going to them over and over again, vote by vote, because it's that small? I mean, that's really an amazing effort that you have to put on.
When it's that small, the candidate can actually talk to every single one of those people. It's not like running for president or running for the Senate. If you're running for state house, you can talk to individually every single person you need to win.
And
And
that battle,
so
yeah, that battle's going on right now.
it's been happening for months and it'll be going on for the next 80 days.
All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Abou.
Thanks, Esme.
Coming up, House Democratic Majority Leader Representative Jamie Long. Joining us right now is the House Majority Leader, Jamie Long. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Esme. Good to be with you.
All right. Kind of overshadowed by just a little bit going on in all these other races in the world of politics is this battle for the Minnesota House. How big a deal is this as far as you're concerned?
I think it's a very big deal. We had Democratic control over the legislature and governor for only the first time in the last 10 years this last session. And I think Minnesotans can be really proud of the work we did. We ended what was many years of gridlock where we really weren't able to make progress on the big issues that Minnesotans cared most about. And this year, we made historic investments in our schools and our infrastructure, past paid family medical leave, reproductive rights protection, 100% clean energy, and so much more. And I think a lot of our accomplishments are what helped propel Governor Walz to the national stage that he's on right now. And so I do think that we are fighting hard to hold the House because we know that a lot of those priorities that I just mentioned didn't have bipartisan support. And so we're pretty concerned that if the House flips back, that we're going to see rollbacks on a lot of the investments we made and a lot of the protections that we set forward for Minnesotans.
All right. And you got a really slim majority. It's 4 seats, right?
That's right, which means 2 votes in my math in the House, and so it is a close majority, and we're not taking it for granted. We're going to fight hard to make sure we're keeping it.
You know, one of the things that really interests me is just these seats have 87,000 people in them. How do you get in there to get into a district where the margin of victory might be just a few hundred votes?
Yeah, we had a seat decided by 15 votes last time and a seat decided by 33 votes. So these are really tight margins in a lot of these districts. And I think the strength of our effort on the Democratic side and the reason we've been able to hold a majority in the House for the last 3 cycles is that we do the grassroots work. So we are out there door knocking like crazy and having the conversations with individual Minnesotans to learn about what their values are, what they want us to be focusing on. And I think that's our strength. We're consistently one of the best performing caucuses in the entire country, and we're not one of the biggest states. So I think that shows that we're really good at this work of making sure we're engaging with voters directly where they are.
Well, you know, I don't have to tell you this, your old boss, Keith Ellison, as a congressperson, really set a framework in Minneapolis for this extraordinary kind of machine that's out there that can deliver. But how do you do that in other communities? I mean, let's talk about Representative Pawlowski's seat. He's been there for so long. It's
Yes.
one that the Republicans are all over. I've talked to them about it. I mean, how do you get into that seat and keep it when that is no longer Democratic territory? That's solid Trump territory.
Well, I do think that that seat is going to go for Harrison Walz at the top of the ticket.
Really?
Yes, I do. It has in the past. It went for Hillary. So it is a seat that is still Democratic. It's a college town. You're right that I think a lot of the surrounding communities are trending against us, but we have a great candidate down there in Sarah Kruger who grew up in the community, is connected to the community, has done a lot of grassroots organizing herself over the years on democracy issues and reproductive rights. And so I think that she's going to be a tremendous candidate for us. And I know that she's committed to doing the work and getting out there and talking to voters. And I don't think there's any magic to it. I think it's just about helping people understand what the choice is. And I think when voters understand that the choice is between continuing to go forward with the progress that we've made with Governor Walz, or frankly, returning to gridlock and rolling back a lot of the work we did, I think voters are going to side with us. And I do think that's a seat we're going to hold.
How about Representative Listlegard's seat, in northern Minnesota? I mean, that's another one that Republicans think that they can get their hands all over and turn around. I mean, that looks like that would be tough.
Well, I don't think that's going to be as easy as they think. It was certainly sad to see my colleague, Representative Listlegard, retire. He's been a tremendous advocate for the range in the legislature. But Lori Janatopoulos is our candidate up there, and she's a phenomenon. She has been working so hard out on the doors, raising money. She's connected to the community. She's been doing economic development work in that community for a long time, and so she's really well known. I think she's going to do really well, and I'm excited to see how she does, and I know that she's working very hard.
Republicans this year seem to be trying to get the message out that early voting matters, which of course they've, especially with former President Trump, I mean, who's denounced early voting in the past. This has really helped Democrats. And obviously November 5th, we could have a blizzard here in Minnesota. I mean, do you think, how big a deal is early voting for you? And do you think Republicans can catch up to where Democrats are?
Well, I think they certainly realize that they're at a disadvantage in terms of the work that we've done there, and I don't think Trump did them any favors in that regard in trying to falsely undermine the valid forms of election like early voting or same-day registration. But I think that the enthusiasm in Minnesota is going to be really high on our side. I think I've already heard from so many voters and volunteers who are thrilled to get out and vote for Governor Walz on the ticket and for Kamala Harris at the top. So I think in the past we've had some challenges, frankly, about enthusiasm gap with Trump on the ticket, but I don't think we're going to have that gap this time. I do think that Democrats are very motivated to turn out, and so I think we're going to have very high turnout across the board, and particularly on our side.
So you're really seeing that change at the top of the ticket really is filtered down to what you believe will be these House races that you can hold.
Yes, I mean, we've had volunteers who have are motivated by the ticket who've never come out before and are coming out and door knocking for us. We have had, I think, really good response on the doors. I've talked to people directly who said, I wasn't sure I was going to vote, but with Governor Walz on the ticket, I'm going to be out there. I'm going to help support him. So I think that's going to help us. And but like I said at the beginning, it's still not something we can take for granted. I think that a lot of the districts where Democrats perform really well are districts like mine in the heart of the Twin Cities. And so I'm feeling confident at the top of the ticket, but some of these individual districts are going to be a lot closer, and we need to work really hard to make sure we're turning out our folks.
Well, listen, Jamie Long, Majority Leader Jamie Long, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
A reminder, voting starts sooner than you might think on September 20th. That does it for this edition of Talking Points. As always, please feel free to email me with comments and suggestions at esme@cbs.com. The show streams on CBS News Minnesota every Wednesday and Thursday night at 6:30 and 9:30 p.m. On Fridays, it posts to YouTube for on-demand viewing. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Esme Murphy, WCCO News.